Welcome to the Pranic Healing Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Yuan. And on this episode, we're going to talk about the science view of pranic healing or energy healing. It's part of my mission in starting this podcast, and a lot of the work that I do outside of the podcast relates to educating the public about energy healing and how research and science looks at energy healing from more of a evidence-based or objective manner. Let's kind of get into it. So the modern scientific definition of energy healing, as we know it, is called Biofield Therapies. Bio means life. Field is basically this invisible electromagnetic field around our physical bodies. And therapies, of course, is any sort of tool or modality that has health benefits. Therapies is the term that we use, although it is not all encompassing, of course. We know that other things that do not have, life or living cells also has energy, as we know in pranic healing. When we do the scanning technique, right? When we scan things such as our bed, our tables, rooms, there's energy everywhere. But, for the current framework in science, we're going to run with biofield therapies. And it's interesting to start looking at energy healing from this perspective because science comes from a completely different view of life in healing. Science looks at things at what's called a reductionist model. Basically, what can we find? What can we see? And what can we continue to shrink, reduce, and look at smaller, tissues to cells to atoms, right? What can we continue to break this down further? With energy healing, that is a challenge because there is currently no gold standard evidence scientific device to measure energy, right? To measure your aura, to measure your chakras. And in pranic healing, we have the scanning technique, which is basically a rudimentary way of measuring the energy in our body and the quantity and the quality. In science, we have something called the scientific method, which is basically the way that research is done. If it is done well, there is a certain degree of reproducibility, meaning if you do the experiment one way, another person that does the exact same experiment should be able to come up with the similar results or outcomes. And we know with scanning, there's a lot of different factors that will influence a pranic healer in measuring the energy. There is a challenge there. In Master Choa's books, Kirlian photography is another tool that has been used to kind of see the changes before and after healing, right? See the changes within the energy body, or as we call it, the aura. So Kirlian photography is, of course, an amazing device. It is not, 100% accurate, consistent, and specific. There are still other ways to look at research on energy healing without having to, say exactly, there was this amount of energy before and, this X percent of energy after. What we do in science and research is to explain the mechanism, right? To explain how energy healing works. We kind of look at it from a broader picture. This can be, looking at changes to cell lines. Our body's made up of cells that compose of tissues, and tissues compose of organs. When we can look at cell lines, of course, science loves to be reductionist. We can kind of see how energy healing works. And there's been a lot of different research on pranic healing with, cancer cell lines, but all different types of energy healing modalities. Some of these studies have shown outcomes where energy healing, the severity of cancer burden, which means cell lines, right, that receive energy healing, less tumor growth or less tendencies for cells to become cancerous. That's sort of one area. With biofield therapies, there's other ways of also looking at it, which is, looking at, animal subjects instead of just looking at cells. When we look at sort of, mice and rats, we can see also the similar changes as well in reducing the cancer load of tumors in mice that have received energy healing versus mice that. That's a pretty common finding in terms of using energy healing research in cancer cell lines. The other thing that we also tend to look at different markers. This can be like inflammatory markers. Energy healing studies have shown to, again, improve these metrics of health, showing that it reduces certain inflammation markers, improves certain immune function markers. Why the effects of energy healing works, right? When someone says arthritis is gone, not only their pain is gone, but we can see just from the outside looking in using these studies as almost like a reference to say this is what's going on. Their inflammation markers of C-reactive protein have gone down, which is great, and it paints the picture for scientists and researchers to see how energy healing works. When we look at psychotherapy, this is a needed tool in pranic healing where we work on patients with different, psychological conditions. And those tend to be, of course, a little bit more challenging to measure objectively in medicine because, we're talking about people's feelings, their emotions, their thoughts, their mood. How do we draw more information out of this? With these studies, we found that people that do it consistently and have received the benefits tend to have a better outlook on life. They tend to be more resilient when it comes to certain challenges that come up. They tend to not relapse back into their old psychological conditions, which might be anxiety, depression, past traumas. That's a very encouraging sign. All these different ways of looking at biofield studies from a research perspective is to anchor the inevitable, which is, there is this energy around us, right? This biofield, and it has tremendous potential for healing purposes, for clinical medical healing purposes. And I think that's going to be a big shift in science and also, of course, in medicine, because now, no longer will you need something, like over-the-counter medications, I like to say, for something that can be treated very effectively using pranic healing, using different forms of energy medicine. In order for that to happen, there has to be a robust evidence base. There is much more evidence now than ever, but of course, as with anything in science and medicine, it requires a long and drawn out process to ensure the safety and efficacy or effectiveness. And that's where, the Pranic Healing Research Institute comes in. And that's where a lot of these different organizations that support integrative medicine research, which is basically, holistic approaches to health. And we're not saying that, energy healing, pranic healing is going to replace anything, but it's going to serve as a complement to the standard protocols that is already in medicine. And of course, as I mentioned in previous podcasts, Pranic Healing Research Institute has done several amazing studies on showing pain management, right? Using pranic healing with conventional pain management drugs to support even better outcomes for lowering pain. Other research related to meditation on twin hearts and the effects on the neural biology and the sort of brain waves during the practice, right? To show that, again, the brain becomes more resilient, healthier, has better cognitive focus and attention and things like that. So, I think this is a very exciting field. One ways that you can start helping, which is sort of the key topic to this podcast, is to start building a case study base. If you're not familiar with the term case studies are sort of the most basic forms of research evidence. We kind of see this with pranic healing with the certification program. If you've gone through the pranic healing certification program, you have to, do say 20 cases and show that there is improvement in these 20 cases. In medicine, there are these case studies, which is a little bit longer and drawn out just because you are writing it as if you are teaching someone completely new what you are doing. These case studies are important because, one, it can be done by anyone. And two, when you have a robust system of case studies, you can connect different case studies together to create what's called a case series. And with a case series, it's an even stronger group of evidence because you're showing that, let's say, pranic healing for back pain. One person that did 3 cases on pranic healing for back pain. There's another person that did a couple cases and another person that did a couple cases. We can group all these cases together and call it a case series instead of looking at each of these cases individually, which is a weaker evidence. We can look at it as a whole. Okay, let's say there's 100 pranic healers that did 300 case studies on lower back pain. It provides a strong foundation for the next step, which is to do pilot studies. So pilot studies are these initial concept studies to test the theory. Okay, it seems like pranic healing tends to work pretty well for lower back pain. Let's test this officially, right, using high quality research design. Let's go find patients. Let's compare it to placebo. Let's compare it to the control, which is, maybe they're on pain medication. Let's compare it with and without pain medication, right? Let's randomize it. Let's make it blinded. It's very important, especially with pranic healing, to build these case studies because it further shows how, this energy healing works, and it further supports, future pranic healing studies. If the pilot study did go well, let's say we recruited, 50 patients for lower back pain and that worked really well. So now we can bring it into an even larger cohort, right? Instead of having 50 patients as the sample size, we can maybe have like 1,000, right? So it goes exponential from there. But all of this requires a lot of time, effort, a collaboration from all of us as pranic healers to do these case studies. What I'll post is in the link down below. We have linked to the pranic healing research website, and we have actually a way for you to submit case studies yourself. And we will have some sample case studies for you to look at, for you to reference. And if you have, especially any case studies yourself, you can change it in a way and add it into a way to make it more of the standard conventional case studies that we're thinking about in science. This will help, again, move not only the Pranic Healing Research Institute's effort forward, but of energy healing. We will leave the link to the Pranic Healing Research Institute down below. If there are any questions, feel free to comment down below or message me. I am really happy to help answer any questions related to that. Now, science looks at energy healing with the term biofield therapies. In order for energy healing to become part of mainstream medicine and to complement traditional medical care, we need to build a substantial evidence base. It's not enough that you healed your friend, your family member of their back pain, in 20 minutes, right? In science, we need proof, we need evidence to see it. Not only in some hospitals, but all hospitals, right? In all clinics, in all types of healthcare positions, right? So that's a very exciting day. The goal of any healing modality is to be objective, to be evidence-based, to be effective, to be efficient. Master Choa designed the pranic healing protocols, whether it's for the advanced protocols or the psychotherapy protocols. It was done in a way that it worked on multiple people. And again, if you follow instructions, you will get the result. If you follow the instructions, you make case studies, right, in which we can build into case series. That will help drive the needle forward in terms of bringing energy healing, pranic healing into mainstream medicine. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Pranic Healing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating down below. And also, we would appreciate your support for this podcast, as your contributions help support the operations of this podcast to make it free and available worldwide, and to help us have on amazing guests different weeks to talk about something different in the world of pranic healing, the world of spirituality, and the world of science and medicine. All right. Thank you, everyone. Atma Namaste. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you in the next podcast.